chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications. The following program is a production of Chilling Entertainment and the creative team at Chilling Tales for Dark Nights, and a proud member of the Simply Scary Podcasts Network. Visit simplyscarypodcast.com to learn more about this and our other weekly storytelling programs. Thank you for listening, and enjoy the show.
Good evening. I'm storyteller Otis Jiry, and I ain't your grandfather. From where I'm from, we don't do bedtime stories. And if that's what you were expecting, you're in the wrong place. If it's terrifying tales you're after, well then, I've got just the thing. Get comfortable, settle in, turn off the lights, if you dare. Your night is about to get a whole lot darker. Who needs sleep anyway?
Good evening, children of the dark. I'm your host, Otis Jiry, and I'd like to welcome you back to Scary Stories Told in the Dark. The 5 stories we have for you this evening all begin the same way, with someone crossing into a place they should never have gone. Maybe they're following curiosity. Maybe they're chasing a mystery. Maybe they're just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Whatever the reason, the trespass never goes unpunished.
That's right, friends. And tonight's tales all come from one source. The mind behind them is Jesse Pullins, a name some of you already know from the darker corners of the internet. These stories come courtesy of our partners at Velox Books, from Jesse's brand new collection, Silent Screaming, now available on Amazon in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle editions. We'll tell you more later, but suffice it to say, if you enjoy what you hear tonight, you'll want the other dozen nightmares waiting for you in its pages.
Indeed. For now, get comfortable, lock the doors, and maybe double-check your windows, especially if you hear anything outside. Before we begin, a quick note for those listening to our standard edition. Did you know that for just $7.99 a month, or less with our yearly plan, you can unlock so much more? That's right, ad-free listening, early access to new episodes, and extended editions with extra stories you won't hear anywhere else.
You can join the patrons area right now at simplyscarypodcast.com and clicking the patrons link, or at chillingtalesfordarknights.com. You'll be supporting the show, and you'll be treating yourself to a vault of exclusive chills.
Thank you so much for helping us continue bringing nightmares to life.
Now, back to the show.
Our first tale tonight takes us into the familiar comfort of a neighborhood park. Or at least that's what it's supposed to be. But when our protagonist encounters something impossible on the other side of the path, comfort turns to dread, and the closer it comes, the more wrong it gets. Here's The Floating Dog by Jesse Pullins, performed by yours truly, Otis Jiry. I eat lunch in the park every day. I take the elevator down, exit the lobby, and walk to whatever food truck's parked in the corner. Sometimes it's a hot dog, other times it's street tacos. Once I buy my food, I like to go and sit at the park and eat. There's a fountain in the middle and a jogging trail that circles around it. On the days it's busy, it's nice to sit and people watch. On the days it's not, I scroll through my phone to kill time while I enjoy the breeze. Parents pushing strollers, men and women jogging in spandex. Sometimes the pigeons bounce over, and I toss them bits of my hot dog bun or tortilla, or the last of my fries. It's been pretty peaceful, aside from the guy I saw 2 days ago. A homeless man running in the park, shouting at everyone around him. His commotion seemed to make everyone uneasy, heads turning and watching him flail at seemingly nothing. People sort of turned the other cheek and ignored him, as it wasn't entirely uncommon in the big city. A couple close by on a bench paused their chat over coffee for a moment before disregarding him completely. In the end, he ran away, his "help me" echoing until he was out of sight. I tossed my scraps to the pigeons and returned to work. Back through the lobby, back up the elevator, back to work. Yesterday I did the same as usual, same regime, down to get food, a deluxe hot dog today, with a poppy seed bun and a huge pickle, like a salad bar and link on a bun. I sat on the bench, like usual. There weren't many people out there, so I settled on the bench, took a messy bite of my lunch, and started scrolling through social media. Oh God, someone help me, please! I heard it coming from behind me, an approaching whimper that approached so fast it startled me. A blur rushed past me and knocked me in the elbow. My lunch tumbled onto the dirty concrete, a sight that made the pigeons take notice. A woman ran past me and into the park, huffing and crying, tears streaming down her face. There wasn't really anyone around, and those who saw her made an effort to ignore her. With hands squeezed into fists, she let out a panicked cry, looking to anyone for help. She whirled around, and I felt my stomach twist when she saw me. She must not have even noticed me sitting there, despite ruining my lunch. You gotta help me! It's coming!" she shouted, begging me to come closer. Her hair was a mess, but she didn't look homeless, just desperately out of breath. Sitting on the bench, I looked at her reluctantly. I looked at my lunch on the ground and swiveled on the bench to look behind me. There was nobody there, just your average busy street. No one was giving chase. No one even really saw her. I turned around and saw that the chubby little birds had already swarmed my food. "What's coming?" I asked her, awkwardly, seeing nothing but hungry pigeons. She looked at me incredulously. "Are you kidding me? Look at it! Look!" She pointed desperately, starting to sob. I started to feel anxious, and I turned to look again. There was nothing chasing her, nothing at all. I heard sirens in the distance and the busy horns of traffic. There was nothing to see. "I'm sorry, I don't know how to help you. Do you want me to call the police?" I sat up from the bench and offered my phone. She just shook her head, her lips trembling, and she started backing away. Miss?" I called out to her. A jogger came around the corner in bright green spandex, AirPods stuck in his ears, and she reached for him and touched his shoulder. He flinched away, waving her off and saying something like, "I don't have any money." She looked past me, a look of utter defeat as she kept backing away. I looked in the same direction, wanting to help, but there was nothing there. Nobody was lingering behind a tree or creeping after her. "Oh, God, I'm gonna die," she was saying. "Miss, let me help you," I said, heading towards her. "Here, I'll call the police. I'll stay here with you until they—" "No, I can't stay. I have to go now. It's too close." Then she was gone, running in the same fashion the homeless man had the day before. Today, it was raining. I looked out at the weather and contemplated my lunch. I didn't want to get wet, but I really wanted to get out of the office. So I decided to go. I grabbed my wallet and keys and pulled on my jacket. I stepped into the elevator and rode down. I exited through the lobby and stepped out into the rain. There was a pretzel truck today, and I could already taste the salt and cheese. I winced against the rain and ordered a giant pretzel, paid the guy, and waited patiently, looking at my bench from underneath the shelter of the food truck. It's empty, just like I expected. The park's empty, too. except for something lying in the middle of the park. I couldn't quite see it, but I got the nagging feeling something wasn't right, like it's a body. "Hey man, you see that?" I asked the cook, and he leaned out the window to look. "See what?" he asked impatiently, squinting to see through the rain. "I don't know, man. It's green. There, you see it?" I asked, pointing directly at it. "Nah, man," he said, and went about getting the pretzel ready. I wanted to wait, but the eerie curiosity nagged at me. I left the food truck and crossed the street in the rain. I saw the shape clearer as I got close, and I started to feel sick. There's no way. It couldn't be. Rain hammered the fountain water and the stretch of grass before it. Slumped on their side off the running path was a jogger in green, their body still in the heavy rain. I approached, cautiously digging out my phone. Before I even saw him, I knew he was dead. The jogger's eyes were lifeless, globes with the light sucked out of him. His mouth was open, and it looked like he was foaming at the mouth. I tried to shake him, but his body was solid and ice cold. Like he's been dead a while, frozen. Suddenly, I got a searing, mind-splitting headache, like my brain was being ripped apart. I cried out in pain, squeezing my eyes closed as I grabbed my head to try and ride out the pain. My knees buckled and I fell next to the jogger, writhing on the ground in agony. As quickly as it started, the migraine blinked away. I sat up in the grass, water soaking through my pants and running down my face. My chest was heavy, and I gasped for breath, overcome with the relief that the pain had faded away. When I looked around to the ground next to me, I gasped. The jogger was gone. What the? I looked around to see if anyone else saw it, but there was no one there. It was mind-boggling. But bleeding into my confusion was a gnawing, primal fear. I felt its presence before I saw it, and when I did, I felt my breath being ripped from my lungs. There was a faint ringing in my ears, one I could tell was getting louder as it got closer. An unexplainable horror in both its appearance and its movement. I watched it approach from across the park, a slow glide that seemed to be homing in on where I was standing. It was a floating dog, dead from the looks of it. It was standing up straight, its hind legs dangling perfectly still, just inches above the ground. Its paws were aimed straight out like they were posed, like a real-life model of something that didn't render properly. Blood dripped down the sharp teeth of its bottom jaw, trickling down a red stain that soaked into its fur. The top jaw is missing completely, like it broke off half of its skull. Just seeing it makes me scream. I started to move, and it turned just slightly, adjusting its path so it would eventually meet me. Even with it so far away, I could smell it. A putrid, gag-inducing smell of death, decay, and festering maggots. I shouted again, but there was no one to hear me. I panicked and ran across the street, cars blasting their horns as they halted right before me. I yelled and rambled at them, and they waved me furiously off the road. When I looked back, he was following. The same slow glide, paws pointing toward me, standing perfectly still even as it started clipping through the passing cars. It stopped for nothing. The man at the pretzel truck was irritated, still holding the order for me. He cleared his throat to let me hear it, but I didn't even give him the chance. "Help! You gotta help me. You see that? You see that thing following me?" I cried, grabbing his arm and shaking him. "Come on, man," he starts, but I beg him to look. He looked down the sidewalk where the floating dog was approaching. My ears rang and I gagged against the smell, releasing a gurgle of vomit that splashed against the side of the food truck. "Oh, man, what the hell? There's nothing there, man. Now get out of here," he shouted angrily. I took off down the sidewalk. It wouldn't stop for anything. The same eerie glide through the rain. When I looked at it, I felt like I was going to die. I ran down the street like a madman, asking every person who crossed my path. I didn't see the dog. Of course they didn't. They waved me off and pulled out their phones, offering to call the police, or get me help, or hand me money. I couldn't see it. Nobody can see it. Why won't it stop? Why won't it stop following me? I've been riding the subway for hours. I'm afraid to go home, afraid of what will happen when it catches me. I know it's out there. I don't want to see it. I'm scared to see it. But I'm so tired. I'm not sure how long I can keep running from it. The subway ride's a loop across the entire city, and I paid to ride it through the night. I'm pretty sure I'm safe, for now at least. But every time I close my eyes, I catch a whiff of that horrible smell. Only for a moment, and then it's gone. That was The Floating Dog by Jesse Pullins, performed by yours truly, Otis Jiry. If that taste of his work gives you chills, you're in luck. Tonight's episode features just 5 of the 17 tales from his new book. You can find it right now on Amazon in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle.
And after that opener, I can promise the other 12 are just as unsettling. Makes you think twice about walking the dog after dark. Or maybe just about going outside at all. In our next tale, a small-town curiosity becomes an irresistible lure. A house wrapped in miles of extension cords sits in plain sight, daring someone to come closer. And, of course, someone does. Here's The Extension Cord House by Jesse Pullins, performed by yours truly, Malcolm Blackwood. The house stood among the trees like an open sore, a condemned heap of lumber and tattered shingles that was dwarfed by the surrounding forest. The structure begged to be demolished, and the wildlife looked ready to reclaim it at a moment's notice. The longer I looked at it, the more I wondered if I was at the wrong address. My watch beeped, and I lowered the binoculars, feeling the chilly air nip at the back of my neck. It had just turned 10 o'clock, but lying in the weeds, it felt like 3 in the morning. The moon couldn't seem to get a word in through the clouds, and the house itself seemed to radiate its own perpetual darkness. Even from across the street, the house felt wrong. I got off my stomach and crouched in the grass, chewing my lip. My gut urged me to go home, and I thought of my car, parked on the agricultural road about 100 yards away. I could just leave and forget about this place, forget it even existed. Just the thought of leaving made me feel guilty, and I couldn't help but dig my phone out of my pocket. I thought of Teddy, and I started to sweat. I read the text again for the 1,000th time. Heading there now. Sure you haven't changed your mind? Teddy was my younger brother. We didn't have the best childhood growing up. Between our father being in and out of prison and our mother working double shifts, we were left to our own devices the majority of the time. It was something that made us stray from the path of normal blue-collar children. With my mother struggling to make ends meet and the continuous lack of money, it was easy to pick us out from the other kids at school, something that would eventually get us into constant trouble in years of bullying and being outcasts. Despite the hardship, Teddy and I found ways to ease our path through a life where money had the final say. We started taking it whenever we could. It started small and innocently, if I might add. A couple bucks here and there from other students, enough to afford things we didn't have, like laundry, soap, or deodorant. With enough practice, we learned to lift wallets and purses with ease. We preyed on other students at our high school for whatever cash their parents sent them with, be it book rental fees or lunch money. It wasn't personal, it was just there. And the worst part of it all, the money came easily. We always distanced ourselves from the owners of the money we took, and we only attempted it if we were sure we could get it without there being an altercation. We didn't want to be anywhere near them when they realized it was gone either. In the end, I think it helped with our guilt. For all we knew, they assumed they lost it. When we got older and out of school, we started casing places together. Planning. Trying to be better. Pickpocketing on the street was tough, and the pay didn't justify the risk. We hit our first house before we were 20, spent weeks making sure they wouldn't be home. At first, the few $100 in cash didn't seem worth it, but the yield from pawning trinkets ended up being the real prize. Engagement rings, heirloom watches, coin collections. The investment of scoping houses and scouring them would triple, sometimes quadruple a day of pulling wallets. Each score would provide enough to catch up on everything and buy necessities, even allowing for a few weeks of downtime. As the years passed, we honed our craft, planning each job patiently, methodically. Countless hours practicing lockpicking on dummy locks and researching home surveillance, memorizing mail routes, garbage pickup. The best houses to hit were those who went out on the town for the night, whether it be a club or a casino. We were pretty damn good at it too, enough to make a living off of it easily. We would spend 2 weeks planning and hit the house on the weekend. Everything seemed to be going well, almost foolproof, until the last house we hit together. Teddy was getting impatient, cocky, swore only 1 week of planning would be enough, that we were taking too much time. I reluctantly agreed, my gut feeling pushed away by the thought of the extra money. We cased a place outside of town and waited for a Friday night. Watching from the field across the street, we observed as a couple left and locked the door behind them, all dressed up for a night out. They got in the only car in the driveway and drove away. The house barely lit with some of the kitchen lights on. Nobody else looked to be inside. The coast looked clear. Teddy stood watch while I picked the lock, and when we got in, we went straight to the bedroom. We tossed the drawers and moved on to the closet like we usually did, but something wasn't right. The lights started to come on in the house, followed by the scuffs of little feet on the carpet. Standing in the doorway was a preteen girl and 3 little kids. Each had to be under 10 years old. Turns out the babysitter and the couple's children had been hanging out in the basement watching movies. Together, we all froze, the children terrified and crying as they looked at the 2 scary men in ski masks, their eyes falling to the crowbars in our hands. Teddy was the first to move, raising his crowbar in an attempt to scare them off. The kids started to scream, and I told Teddy to back off, deciding it was best to just call it a bust and walk away. We had to jump through the window and make a run for it, and we got away clean, but there was something about that night that put me off the whole thing. The look in their eyes when they caught us, and the uncertainty I felt when Teddy walked toward them. I didn't want to do it anymore. Despite Teddy's frustration, I went clean, got a job stocking goods at a local store, earning an actual check while I sat on my nest egg. Teddy tried to do the same, but proved unable to adjust to a normal life where money had to be earned instead of taken. I tried to get him on the right track, but he fought me every step of the way. In the end, we parted ways, and he went back to casing places alone, while I spent my nights stocking shelves and trying to blend in as a normal person. As the months passed, I started to enjoy my new attempt at life. I even met a girl at the store I was working at, and we started seeing each other. We didn't have a lot of money, and I was slowly bleeding my nest egg going on dates and buying things for my apartment. The urge to do another job would return, but each time I would think of the look of terror on the faces of those kids, and it would melt away. Even last week, when I got a text from Teddy. Another attempt to get me back in, something he would do every couple weeks, despite our falling out. He had been doing jobs on his own for a while now, focusing on houses out in the country. said he had found one almost completely surrounded by trees, one that nearly looked abandoned. There were rumors that a hoarder had lived there. He talked a good game and even sent me the address. I knew he wanted me back because we worked better as a team. The thought was tantalizing, imagining finding a nice necklace or earrings, something I couldn't afford with my wage job. Aside from the money, I missed the bond we shared when we worked together. I missed him. The act of no longer doing the jobs and trying to be clean-cut felt like I was missing a limb. Despite the lure to join him, I refused. I couldn't get the image of the children from the last job out of my head. 3 days ago, he sent me another text. "Heading there now. Sure you haven't changed your mind?" I refused again and wished him well, and as he went off to make more than 3 of my checks put together, I went on a date instead. When I got back home, I texted him to see how it went, and he didn't respond. He didn't answer my calls either. Even though we weren't working together anymore, he still always answered his phone. The next day, I went to his apartment and found he wasn't home. His car wasn't there either. I checked public records to see if he had been arrested. When that turned nothing up, I started to worry. I looked up the address and placed an anonymous phone call through Wi-Fi calling at the local library. They performed a wellness check and said, not only was there no one there, but it looked like the place was going to cave in at any second. They assumed I had given them the wrong address. Another day passed. Another day of calling, stopping by his apartment, checking everywhere he would have normally been. It was like he had just vanished out of thin air. The only lead I had was the house. This house. I looked at the text for a little bit longer before tucking my phone away. I climbed onto my knees and looked through the binoculars again, panning them over the porch, the windows, the driveway. It really did look like it was going to collapse at any second. I checked both sides of the street and saw the same abysmal darkness for as far as I could see. There wasn't a car coming for miles in either direction. I walked quickly up the driveway, my backpack feeling oddly comforting on my shoulders. I had brought everything I would need to get into the house, my worn set of lockpicks, a flashlight, and my crowbar. I had dressed dark and in layers to fight against the chill, but my blood was running hot at the thought that something had happened to Teddy. I walked quickly, repeatedly scanning between the door and the windows and making sure there wasn't any movement. The house already looked like it would be painless to get into. No CCTV, no automatic porch light, no key code lock, no barking dog. This would have been easy money if the place didn't look like it had been abandoned for 20 years. The porch steps creaked under my feet as I climbed them, preemptively readying my picks by the time I hit the door. I worked quickly, inserting the tensioner and jimmying the pick until the plug turned. I glanced behind me to make sure nobody was there and turned the knob. The knob turned freely, but the door didn't budge. Not like it was being held by a deadbolt, like it wasn't moving at all. Midway through the door was a mail slot, and I lifted the cover to peek in. There was nothing but a dusty gloom, no lighting whatsoever. I pocketed the picks and pulled the little crowbar from my bag, wedging the tip in between the door and the frame around it. The wood splintered, but the door remained solidly in place. I would be here all day, and all I would get was a mess. Crowbar in hand, I left the porch and circled around the house, looking through the windows as I worked my way to the back. The windows were covered in a film of dust and dirt, and I could barely see inside. I decided to find a way in through the back, out of sight of the road. The lawn was erratically overgrown, with tufts of weeds protruding up to waist height, nearly making me trip every other step. The dark outside seemed to suffocate, and between the lack of visibility and the rugged terrain, I started to feel out of my depth. Part of me wished I was still back at the store stocking shelves, but the thought of Teddy pushed me forward. Maybe he had gotten in and the floor had collapsed. Or maybe he had knocked his head or something. These reaching thoughts felt silly, but they kept me from thinking of something worse. Around the right corner, I hugged the wall until I reached the backyard. The place hadn't seen a mower in years. New saplings and bushes had sprouted amongst the fray of tall grass. Old wooden benches had wasted away, and a frayed rope dangled from a tree from the overbearing weight of a tire swing. I looked away from the forgotten yard and focused on the house, stopping in my tracks immediately. One of the windows had been shattered, something I would expect Teddy to do if he couldn't find another option. There wasn't much glass on the ground outside. Whoever busted it was trying to get in. I looked over the windowsill, my eyes moving from the jagged glass to the nails buried into the wood on the inside sill. There were dozens, each beaten and bent crudely in a hurry. Whoever had put these in wanted to keep people out. I knocked a few pointed shards with my crowbar before climbing in. My gloves were thick and designed for such things, but I wanted to make sure I didn't get any unnecessary cuts. The last thing I needed was bleeding out on the way back to the car. My boots met the tiled floor in a crunch of glass. I was in a little bathroom with a small toilet next to a tiny sink and a glass shower stall tucked next to a water softener. What drew my attention, however, was the immediate tangle in the floor past the glass. It was nearly impossible to tell what it was exactly, but the sight made my heart race. After long seconds of trying to make sense of it, I relented and dug my flashlight out of my pack. The press of the flashlight's button was loud, and the illumination was reeling after being in the dark for so long. Even as I identified the strange mess, I couldn't help but feel confused. It was a sprawl of extension cords, horribly knotted and strewn everywhere. A multicolored collection of yellow and orange, like someone had made a complete mess of it and dumped it in the bathroom. Except the pile didn't stop. It continued into the hall behind it, like tentacles feeling out the space. I stood there for a while, the flashlight trailing the lead to try and find the reasoning behind it, but it led out of the room. For the moment, I tried to ignore it. Find Teddy. That's why we're here. That's all that matters. A brief scan of the bathroom revealed nothing of interest, except for the extension cords. The toilet hadn't been cleaned in ages, a black calcified buildup lining the bowl. The water softener was old, but wasn't idling. The only thing I could hear was the sounds of my own breathing and the glass grating beneath my feet. There didn't seem to be any power running in the house. With the flashlight pointing ahead and the crowbar hefted in my other hand, I moved on from the bathroom, taking a slow step over the ridiculous knot of cords. When I took my first step into the hall, I planted my foot in the only bare spot on the floor that wasn't covered. As I took another step, I nearly tripped. The extension cords were everywhere, a never-ending weave that trailed the entire length of the hall and the sitting room beyond it. Not just a few spools connected together, but hundreds, all twisted and looped in a continuous spread that covered the floor as far as I could see. 3-pronged cords plugged into 2. The ones that weren't braided tightly to make sure they wouldn't come loose were spliced together and mummified with electrical tape. The more I followed the trail to try and make sense of it, the worse it looked. It had to be miles worth of cord. I took my time navigating the littered floor, stepping slowly as I took in the house around me. The wallpaper was peeling from the walls, and the portraits that hadn't been knocked off the walls had shattered frames, the pictures beneath scratched out angrily. I looked within the sprawl on the floor for clues, any sign that Teddy had been through here. The house was very old, but the mesh of cords kept me from seeing any sign of footprints. The rubber coating squeezed and twisted as I worked my way through what I learned to be the ground floor of a bi-level house that contained nothing but dust-covered laundry units on one side and mold-ridden couches on the other. The stairwell door leading to the upper level was hanging open, held in place by the cord's clutter. There was a door next to it, with a bare space in the floor that would accommodate it opening. My first guess would be a basement or a storm shelter. I decided to clear the upstairs first. Taking the stairs was a feat in itself. The continuing tangle of cords proceeded both up and down the steps, and I had to ascend sideways to keep from falling. They draped over the steps like a head of hair, dirty strands weaving through each other in the maddening mess. I placed each step delicately, fearing I would fall and get caught in it. The upper level was divided into 3 distinct areas: a living room with a fireplace on one side, a dining room featuring a long table and chairs, and a kitchen. In the middle of it all was the front door, and when I shone the light upon it, I felt my blood run cold. The front door was barred in place, several planks lined across it, each secured with nails driven both into the door itself and the frame around it. The nails were bent and rusted, several of them broken off on their way in. At the foot of the door was a pile of mail, damp and moldy envelopes strewn across the floor of cords. Different gauges and lengths, all wired into the same maddening mess. The living room was bare aside from a smoking table, and the ashtray was filled to the brim with cigarette butts. The dining room table was littered with the remnants of picked-apart meals, plates and trays splattered with long-dried food that looked like it had been played with. The kitchen was littered with dirty pots and pans, and the dishes that hadn't made it to the fly-buzzing sink were shattered against the countertops. Even in the rattiest of houses, I had never seen such filth. I looked around the mass of cords for signs of Teddy, for his flashlight, his gloves, anything, and found nothing but dirt and grime. The stairs I ascended wound around to the top level. A balconied hallway led to a few rooms at each end of the exposed hall. The flashlight served as my eyes as I trailed the corridor from the living room, stopping halfway at the ceiling in the center of the hall, and the dark crevice looking above. The attic stairs were pulled down, revealing an open hole in their place. I kept the light on it, feeling a chill that was spreading throughout the room. The cords trailed up there as well, a single braid that looked like it had been dragged up. Transfixed on the attic entrance, my fingers tightened around the crowbar, my breath a cloud of fog. There was something about the attic entrance, something that unsettled me more than the house as a whole. I stared at the attic in the eerie silence, feeling the sweat chill on the back of my neck. Through the silence, I could hear something, a faint echo that stirred my nerves on end. A scream, muffled and far away. Below me. I thought of the basement door on the level below. I looked away from the attic and headed back downstairs, traversing the tangle as I went. The scream rang again, and I quickened my pace, nearly sliding down the steps to the landing next to the basement door. The doorknob was cold to the touch. When I opened it, I was hit with the stagnant aroma of decay, a sickening smell that washed into the room. The basement was dark, a single staircase of planks leading down to bare concrete. I descended, each step creaking under my weight as if it were ready to give out at any second. The cords were starting to thin, a cluster of single trails that led into the wall of the basement, into what looked like a hole in the wall. The cinder blocks had been broken apart, leading to another dark expanse. I heard the scream again, a little louder. It was coming from the hole. I wanted nothing more than to turn and leave, to climb back out through the bathroom and run to my car. Instead, I climbed in. The air was thick and musty, the damp smell of dirt and clay clogging my nostrils. A tunnel was carved out behind the hole, a crude passage that slowly descended into the earth. I followed the trails of cords at my feet, the sweat on my forehead chilling as I worked my way forward. Through the wicked tunnel, I could see a faint glow ahead, like a flickering candle in the dark. There was a distant humming, a slow drone that echoed down the man-made tunnel. The crowbar shook in my hand, and the flashlight beam jittered ahead of me. Fighting every urge to run, my feet reluctantly marched forward, each step bringing me closer to the glimmer underground. The passage was narrow, and I felt the walls close in around me. The extension cords continued to trail ahead at my feet, worn threads leading me deeper into the tunnels. I came to a fork in the passage, one lit path down the center and two branching off on either side into total darkness. I shone the light down each, mentally weighing the options as the humming droned in the distance. Down the left, I jumped at the sight of rats scurrying away. The right was littered with tiny masses of fur, larger rodents that looked as if they had died in pain, and the walls were coated in dark, dry splatters. Something had torn them to pieces. As I looked down the lit passage, I heard the scream again, a weak cry of desperation. Teddy. I darted down the center passage, keeping my head low to keep from banging it on the crags above. There was a sickening smell in the air, a toxic smell, like car exhaust. The light continued to spill until I could see clearly without the flashlight. The crowbar held close as the passage started to open up around me. I could see something ahead, a set of steel doors illuminated by a flickering light above, next to an old generator that was chugging away. The generator shook with every chug, the belt looking like it would fly off the pulley at any second. Chained to the generator was Teddy. Shackles bound his wrists, and several rusted chains fastened him to the generator, forcing him to lie awkwardly in place. He squinted as I approached, cowering away as I stepped into the light. His face was heavily bruised, and he had several strange gashes on his body, like someone was trying to carve him alive. He lit up when he saw me, his eyes a mixture of dread and disbelief. He looked happy to see me, but worried. He could barely speak. Each word came out as an incoherent drool. I got my picks and focused on the shackles, popping the primitive locks with ease, one after another. By the time we got the chains free, he was able to form a sentence. "Did she see you?" I looked into his eyes, and his usual carefree demeanor was reduced to a look of pure terror. He looked lost, broken. Who? Behind us, a mechanical scream echoed in the tunnel. Teddy started to hyperventilate, and I helped him to his feet. His legs shook as he stood, but I ushered him away from the generator, handing him the flashlight so he could navigate while I helped him walk. Together we went back into the darkness, the mechanical scream getting louder as we returned to the fork in the road. It was a quick, dry cackle that sounded like jagged nails on a chalkboard. The sound was coming from the left tunnel, and in the darkness, I could see a shifting silhouette through a flurry of sparks, moving toward us in quick, twitching motions. The sight of it, whatever it was, made Teddy shake. "We have to move now," I urged Teddy, shoving him along. We made our way back down the tunnel, the scream haunting us every step of the way. There was another cry along with it, a high-pitched howl that bellowed after us as we bounded toward the hole in the wall. I helped Teddy through, and he wheezed as he struggled to vault the broken blocks. By the time I ducked through, I could see the features of the shape that was chasing us. Wild, thin hair, sunken, beady eyes, a nightgown barely hanging off wiry limbs, the shriek of the weapon in her hands. Teddy limped up the stairs and tripped on the extension cords. The flashlight clattered away, its beam making a kaleidoscope through the dozens of layers of cord. Stumbling myself, I helped him up and guided him into the little bathroom, towards the window we had gotten in from. His limbs struggled to obey, and I had to give him a boost to make it up and out. As Teddy landed awkwardly on the grass outside, I heard the dual screams racing up behind me. I turned just in time to see the shape flying towards me, the mechanical cry vibrating the air as she brought her weapon down. I raised the crowbar defensively, and a flurry of sparks splashed through the dingy bathroom. Through the glow of sparks, I saw an old woman, her face decrepit and rotting beneath tight skin. Clutched in her veiny hands was an electric meat carver, a thin cord trailing behind the bottom directly spliced into another thick cord. She was strong despite her size, and the dated carver sparked off the crowbar, nearly sawing into my chest, a sick, burning smell emanating from the carver's motor. Teddy climbed to his feet and reached a hand through the window. I looked into the eyes of the hag and pushed her as hard as I could, sending her into the shower stall in a crash of broken glass. She thrashed wildly through the debris, climbing to her feet through the wreckage, her eyes already back on me. I looked at the tangle at my feet and tossed the crowbar to Teddy. I knelt down and grabbed an armful of the cords, and just as the hag rushed me again, I threw them at her. She swung again as the cords constricted, the mess of rubber and tape and copper enveloping her like a cluster of serpents. I dove out the window to the sound of sizzles and pops, and as Teddy helped me to my feet, it was joined by the sound of electrocution. The bathroom became a haze of black smoke, and we watched as the hag seized against her now volatile restraints. As she fell to the floor, her gown caught fire, and the last thing I could see was the simultaneous ignition of melting electrical tape. Teddy and I fled the house, working our way through the uneven yard as quickly as we could. He rambled apologies about what he had gotten us into, but I ignored him and focused on the road ahead, as well as the house behind us. Even after we were down the driveway, I expected the hag to catch up, screaming while wielding that meat carver. But each time I looked back, there was nothing but the swaying trees that surrounded the house, trees that looked eager to consume. By the time we made it back to the agricultural road, we could smell the smoke. The horrid, melting smell of an electrical fire and rotting wood wafted through the trees. By the time I helped Teddy into the passenger seat, I could see the glow in the distance. I started the car and pulled away, the tires spitting gravel as we got the hell out of there. Heading toward the nearest hospital, we drove through the smoke wafting over the road, our eyes drifting toward the glow within the trees. The extension cord house was lit up like a burning star, a roaring blaze of green and blue hues that reached spitefully towards the sky. Leaving the madness behind, I glanced in the rearview mirror and felt my stomach twist up. In the dancing shadows of the fire, I swore I could see something shambling out of the driveway. A thin figure with a burning trail behind them, like a leash. That was The Extension Cord House by Jesse Pullins, performed by yours truly, Malcolm Blackwood. And, if you're wondering, no, I don't think the power bill was the scariest thing about it.
I'm more concerned about the homeowners' decorating choices. But then again, that's why I don't go peeking into strange houses. Our third story takes us to a place we've all driven past without a second thought. The open strip of land between high-voltage wires. Nothing there but weeds, dirt, and the hum of electricity, until someone decides to follow it just a little too far. Here's Beneath the Powerline by Jesse Pullins, performed by yours truly, Otis Jiry. Every day I drive to the local gas station and smoke cigarettes on my lunch break. I work in assembly on a clean campus, and smoking is strictly prohibited on the premises. Luckily, the gas station isn't far, and I get to have about 20 minutes of peace and quiet and decompress. I do the same thing every time, meticulously watching the clock on the dash while my lunch break ticks away. There's a line of parallel parking-style spots on the side of the building, and I pull up there, enjoying my first smoke while I watch the corn sway in the wind while the radio plays softly. The gas station is less than a mile away, but my job is located outside of town in the country, so the space between places is filled with nothing but a cornfield, trees, and a stretch of power lines running high above. It's a very peaceful, rustic getaway, and oftentimes I zone out, staring off into space, watching the corn sway as my eyes wander aimlessly. 3 days ago, I saw something staring back at me. I don't know how long it had been standing there before I noticed. At first, I acknowledged it like one would notice a tree they hadn't seen before, suddenly becoming aware of an existence that didn't matter, except this tree was humanoid in shape, and by the looks of it, didn't have any skin. It was a few hundred feet away, but there was no denying the fact that something was terribly wrong with it. An icy chill immediately ran up my back, triggering all of my nerves while I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. I looked around to see if anyone else had noticed it, but everyone was just going about their business, pumping gas or hurriedly leaving their car to head inside. I rubbed my eyes and looked again, swearing it had just been a trick of the light. Not only was it still there, but it had moved even closer. It had drifted out of the corn, slightly, leaning against the leg of a tall power line it was under. I could see the slight deviation in the movement while it stood there, as if it were breathing heavily and stopping to catch its breath. Even from so far away, I could see the specks of white for eyes staring at me, and an overwhelming feeling of foreboding tunneled toward me. It felt like I was going to get hit by a car or a plane would crash on top of me. It's hard to explain. It just stood there, staring at me. As the seconds melted into minutes, I snubbed out my smoke and did what every other rational person would do. I grabbed my phone and tried to take a picture of it. It stood there while I opened the app for my camera, holding the same stare as I tried to get the camera to focus. It finally did, and I slowly zoomed in to try and get a decent view of it. But just as my thumb tapped the button to capture it, it disappeared. Not like I looked away and then it was gone. It just vanished into thin air like it ceased to exist. I sat there for a time afterward, unable to shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The longer I sat, the more I wondered if I had just imagined it. Maybe the days of lack of sleep, fatigue, and stress were piling up, and I was just starting to daydream. Maybe I had dozed off and didn't notice. The days had felt so much shorter since daylight saving time. Maybe it was just a case of seasonals picking away at my brain. I kept thinking of scenarios to justify such a thing, even as I pulled out of my parking spot and headed back to work. I kept looking back to the empty spot in the corn under the power line, expecting to see it again, but I saw nothing. After I punched back in, I asked some people on the same line as me, ones I knew would also go and smoke during the allotted lunchtime. I wasn't the only regular there, but I was the only person who saw it. Most told me I needed to get some sleep and stop staying up so late. Others suggested maybe it was just a deer, or maybe someone who lived out in the boonies trying to make themselves viral by scaring people in the corn. In the end, I laughed it off, but throughout the day I was unable to shake the feeling, stricken by what I saw. The dread continued to stay with me even after I punched out for the day and headed home. It persisted through the night, and it made me paranoid when I hung out at home, and even as I crawled into bed. I tossed and turned for a while, thinking of the red humanoid shape lingering in the distance. I kept waking up and looking at the doorway, expecting to see it. Each time, nothing. However, the feeling of unease persisted, even as I began to doze off. That night, I dreamt of walking through the cornfield. Chilly wind was tossing my hair and whipping at my clothes. The corn swayed in the gust, a steady dance that moved across the crops as far as I could see. It was tasteful, yet overwhelming, an intimidating embrace that made me feel small in its vast expanse. Dried husks cracked under my feet, and the mud tried to steal my shoes. I don't know where I am, and I start to feel the swaying stalks close in on me. Above, the power line reaches toward the sky, looming over me like a sinister lighthouse. I look away from the swirling gray overcast, following the legs of the power line. I squint through the stalks to see, and I see a dark crevice in the ground ahead. Beneath the power line is a cellar door hanging open, beckoning me. I wake to the sound of my alarm, drenched in sweat. The fog swirls in my head, oddly hungover from a sober sleep. I look at the doorway of my bedroom and find it empty. The sense of dread continues to loom. I get ready for work and head in, thoughts of corn and the cellar door racing through my mind. I can't shake the thought of it, and it proceeds to pester me through the beginning of my shift. I try to busy my mind and focus on work, tightening fasteners on the brackets of air compressors and running rubber hoses as the clock ticks away. Even as my hands work monotonously, I feel the weight of eyes on me. I constantly look over my shoulder, but there's never anyone there. On my lunch break, I decided to return to the gas station. I convinced myself that I'm just being crazy and there's no reason not to go and enjoy my daily smokes on my break. Just the thought of them sounds so nice. I pull into my usual spot and light up, feeling the weight ease off of my shoulders after the first drag. I sink into my seat, keeping my eyes closed as I ignore the cornfield next to me, telling myself over and over, there's nothing there. I gather the courage to open them, and I look at the cornfield. The power line stands defiantly in the corn, and I feel myself sweating as I trace the length of the spire to the ground. Beneath the tall structure, there's nothing. I breathe a sigh of relief and laugh at myself, nearly coughing as I wipe the sweat from my brow. There's no skinned man, only corn swaying in the wind. I feel better now that I've conquered the fear. I turn my music on and a familiar song crackles over heavy static. I try to tune it down, but the distortion only grows the more I tamper with it. In the end, I turn the volume all the way down and decide I'm going to run into the gas station and buy an energy drink. I suddenly feel parched, and the feeling of ice-cold, electric carbonation sounds too good to pass up. I shut off my car, got out, and stopped. The skinned man was standing near the gas pumps, peeking out at me. His eyes are bright white and beady, his stare freezing me to my core. His limbs twitch, and he takes a step out from behind the pump, a bloody trail smearing the pavement with his footstep. I break out of my fear and look around to see if anyone else sees him. But nobody does. It's like he's not even there. Even as he takes another step towards me, a woman in a hatchback pulls past him, nearly grazing him. His skin's completely gone. Steam radiates from exposed bloody muscles, steady drips of red trickling down his arms and legs. He appears genderless, but his build is masculine. As the woman next to him gets out of the car and starts fueling, his mouth slowly hangs open, and he starts to scream. A scream that nobody can hear but me. I get into my car and I leave, tires squealing, as I turn around in the lot. I keep watching him, terrified he's going to suddenly give chase and rip me out of the car. But he only reaches for me slowly, like he can barely move. When I haul ass down the road, I watch for him in the rearview mirror. He lowers his hand and vanishes. Nobody believed me when I got back to work. I talked about the man with no skin and his scream that no one could hear. From their reactions, I could tell they were less entertained than they had been the day before. Those who didn't laugh excused themselves awkwardly. Those who did neither just looked at me as if I were crazy. My shift crawled for the rest of the day. I was incredibly anxious, a cold sweat dampening my forehead as I looked around cautiously. Everywhere I looked, I swore I saw the skinned man, but only to see an empty aisle or a part rack instead. People tiptoed around me and avoided me entirely, not wanting to draw attention to my increasing paranoia. I kept hearing his scream, the dry cry of an out-of-tune orchestra. Just thinking of it and seeing his open mouth made my skin crawl. Once my shift concluded, I punched out and left work without a word. On the way home, I kept looking around, still unable to shake the feeling of someone watching me. Kept feeling someone staring at me from the back seat, breathing on my neck. Each time I turned to look, there was nothing. Once home, I stayed inside for the rest of the day. I locked the doors and occupied my mind with watching TV, hopping restlessly from one streaming service to the next in search of something to draw my attention. I would occasionally peek out of the windows of my apartment to make sure he wasn't there, but would only see the occasional passing car. Everywhere I looked, I saw those damn eyes staring at me. That night I fell asleep on the couch, the muffled drone of an anime playing from the television. I don't remember when I dozed off, but I soon found my tired paranoia easing into a restless slumber. In my dream, I returned to the corn. I was looking at the power line, watching it tower above me. At my feet was the open cellar, an echoing wind whispering from the dark opening in the muddy earth. Above, the sky swirls gray, and I look down just to see myself jumping in. I fall for a long time, plummeting through darkness silently. There seems to be no end. In the darkness below, I see a faint red glow, a glimmer of light approaching me. I reach for it, hoping it will stop whatever is transpiring. As the light drifts closer, the darkness explodes with sound, the sound of an out-of-tune orchestra. I wake up, covering my ears. The sound's brutal and deafening now that I'm awake. My apartment shakes under it, and I look around to find the source, only to end up screaming. The skinned man is on my balcony, his mouth opened wide in his silent, tortured scream. He places his hands on the glass of the slider, leaning in to see me. The feeling of primal fear swallows me, and I fight the urge to cry. Vomit churns in the confines of my stomach. As suddenly as my dream ended, the skinned man vanished, once again leaving an empty space in his wake. I spent the rest of the night cowering in my room, hiding under the blankets and flinching at every sound. I slept restlessly, plagued by thoughts of being burned alive, my screams echoing over the field of corn. Today, I woke up to my alarms, flinching over the thought of the out-of-tune orchestra, crawled out of bed slowly, my limbs aching from my restless sleep. The thought of getting ready for work fled my mind, and I thought only of the power line in the cornfield. I looked outside and saw the sky was unusually gloomy. My skin crawled with goosebumps that refused to leave, and my hair stood on end. Even in my groggy state, the feeling of being watched refused to leave. I looked everywhere for the skinned man, begging this to stop. It has to stop. I can't keep doing this. Today I got dressed and headed for work, but called it off in the process. I followed the same route in my car, but instead of turning into my work site, I continued until I found the nearby gas station. I pulled into my usual spot, shakingly inhaling a smoke as I looked at the field of corn surrounding it. The power line stood tall, almost menacing in the dark swirl of gloom in the sky. It has to stop. It has to. I snubbed out my cigarette and exited my car, feeling the chilly wind assault me as I closed the door behind me. I considered calling the police, but I wasn't sure what I'd tell them. Every scenario I imagined ended up with me just being called crazy. My feet moved on their own, and I swallowed hard as I started walking in the direction I'd watched so many times on my lunch break. The grass faded and the corn began, and I made my way into the deafening sea of husks ahead. The stalks were loud and cracked under my feet, and the mud sucked at my shoes. I tripped and stumbled on the uneven ground, and I grabbed the stalks in an attempt to keep myself balanced. My legs burned, and the crops scratched and whipped at me. Soon I felt lost in the corn, every step closing me off from the outside world. The corn stalks were taller the further you went in, until eventually I felt like I was being swallowed by them. I kept my eyes on the power line above. I decided I would look there, and if I found nothing, I would turn back and go home. Maybe then I'd get help. Just as I was getting used to the crunch of my footsteps, the ground started to even out, and I found myself in a small clearing. 4 large metal posts stood on each side, posted at each corner of the clearing. I could hear the creak of metal swaying in the wind, and I felt myself shrink as I looked up. I was standing underneath the power line now, next to the leg where I had first seen the skinned man a few days ago. It was eerily quiet and cold in the clearing, moss and dead grass covering the churned mounds left behind by excavation. I felt the strong urge to run back to my car, but every time I closed my eyes, I was reminded by the same piercing stare and scream. If I went back home, I would just return to hiding in my apartment. I looked for disturbed dirt, for a grave, for a body. What I found was nothing but cold dirt and dried husks, with the occasional rock jutting from the earth. I didn't know what I expected to find, but I found no skinned man or signs of there ever being one. The corn swayed in a circle around the clearing, and I felt foolish for wandering out here by myself. The wind picked up, and above the power line, it creaked. I watched the electrical lines sway in the sky, and I felt small and out of my depth. What was I hoping to find here? A skeleton lying in the grass? Stupid, I thought to myself, walking all the way out here with not even as much as a shovel. My hands started to ache from the cold, and I found myself shivering. There was nothing to be found here. Maybe I did need help after all. I turned around to leave, my cheeks burning with frustration. I felt my eyes water, the helpless draw of tears, ready to further my own embarrassment. There is no skinned man. You're just crazy. You're absolutely crazy. As I sulked back to the edge of the clearing, something caught my foot. I tripped and stumbled into the mud, looking back at whatever had a hold of me. It was heavy and cold, and it kicked up a line of dirt in its wake. It was a metal chain. I looked at it, dumbfounded. The links, heavily rusted and caked with dirt. I untangled my foot, then followed the mysterious chain toward the source. I got back on my feet and gathered the slack, staring at it for a moment before tugging on it. The lead disappeared into the earth in front of me, directly under the power line. The chain was cold to the touch, but I wrapped it around my hands and started to pull. The earth fought against me, matted weeds and mud slinging as I ripped it from the ground. I pulled and pulled, digging my heels into the ground as I yanked it free. It caught suddenly, and I put all of my weight behind it, running backwards until it suddenly broke loose. In an uproar of debris, I fell flat on my ass, and in front of me, a wooden door flung open. A whisper cooed from the underground, and I climbed to my feet and walked to it. It was the entrance to a dark pit, a crude ladder leading the way to an unseen destination. My mind begged to call the police, my body pleaded to go home. In the end, I did neither, and my shoes soon found the rungs of the old forgotten ladder. The light above shows a floor of damp dirt and bones, long decayed and hidden in the dark. The passage wasn't as long as I thought. It went down about 10 feet, and I expected it to open up into some grand chasm below. But when the ladder came to an end, I found only a corridor, a 10-by-10 room carved deep into the earth. The light from above pooled in, cutting through a haze of dust and stagnant air. I squinted through the heavy particles in an attempt to see what the light seemed to be avoiding. Once the dusk began to fade, I could hear the whispers growing, a hushed chorus that called to me from the corner of the derelict hole. The walls are etched with erratic text, words toppling over one another in an indecipherable message. I want to read the words, but I'm drawn away, my focus pulled to the center where the light shines the least. In the corner is a brass chair, and sitting in it, a corpse with dozens of limbs. I wanted to look away, but it couldn't. The mummified curled hands demanded my attention. It looked like a human, its skeletal frame filling the entirety of its throne-like seat. Empty eyes and a hanging mouth, its extra bony arms fanning out like wings. A gaping hole sits at the center of the chest, like something had been ripped out of it. Impossibly proportioned and long dead, the being dedicated several appendages to the object it held in its lap. A glass orb, radiating the slightest shimmer of red, the whispers were coming from it. I remember being unable to lift my eyes from the orb. It drew me in whispers, beckoning me to the dying glow it held within. The corpse stayed frozen in place, its decayed frame getting larger the closer I got. It wanted me to take the orb. It was offering it to me. I reached out and touched it, a static aura tickling my fingers as they drew near the glass. I wanted the orb. I needed to hold it. Nothing else seemed to matter. My fingers hovered around the glass in anticipation, and a strange heat billowed from it as I prepared to lift it. I looked into the corpse's eyes, twin skeletal voids that watched from its petrified husk. Just as I grabbed the orb, the corpse's jaw clacked. The orb exploded with red light and with it an unimaginable heat. The red glow consumed me like a raging fire, engulfing me until it covered my entire body. I tried to swipe it off of me, but it started to burn, a wicked chemical boil that seeped into my arms and legs like acid. I watched in horror as my skin began to part with me, bubbling and oozing until I was left with nothing but bloody meat. It collected and twisted in front of me like paint, a writhing mass that slipped through my fingers when I tried to grab at it. My strength began to fade, and my legs no longer felt capable of holding me. I collapsed helplessly to the ground, glaring at the orb in betrayal as it shone bright and decadent. My muscles felt the pain of every speck of dirt, every piece of gravel that scraped mercilessly into my exposed flesh. The pain was unbearable, a never-ending scream across my entire body. The mass of skin contorted and flexed, stretching across the corpse and its many limbs. It webbed between every finger and over every dried tendon, new life taking shape and cracking as it coated over the nightmarish husk. The arms, so many arms, assisted in the new fitting, pulling and tugging until the garb was complete. I could only reach out in my misery while it repaired itself, the horrible form worsening the longer I watched it mold. Joints popped to life, thin eyelids blinked. Once the form was complete, the gaping chest cavity quivered in agitation. Before my unblinking eyes, the being picked up the orb with its many hands and buried it in its chest. The cavity sealed on its own, tendrils of thin skin stitching itself until the red glow was no more. While I lay helpless, in pain on the cold dirt, the being rose from the chair, standing and stretching tall, before hunching over on its multiple limbs. It looks at me for a moment, and motionless, clacking echoes in the chamber before it, makes its way to the ladder and climbs it like a spider. The last I see of the monstrosity is its appendages slinking into the light right before the door slams shut behind it. I've been in this darkness ever since. I don't know how long I've been down here. Hours, days, weeks. All I know is my constant suffering and my inability to escape it. Despite my exposed body, I'm immune to the cold, immune to the prospect of perishing. That's not the only change. Since discovering the corpse, I can feel an extension of myself, an ethereal tether that allows me to move beyond my miserable form on this cold earth. Some kind of drift between time and space. I don't know if it's an aftermath or an after effect of the orb itself, or my fractured sanity in this tomb that I've found myself in. I can do other small things like move grains of dirt or sway the air one way or another. In an attempt to reclaim some of my sanity, I've inscribed my story on the walls of this grave. But the longer time goes on, the foggier the memories seem to get. I don't understand it. I can only hope what I think is transpiring is real and not a fabrication of my delusional misery. I can't go far, but each time I find I can get a little further. I can see the cornfield above my tomb. I can almost feel the air dancing across it. If I focus hard enough, I can see myself. I don't know why they're there, or if it's even real, but if I try hard enough, maybe I could reach them. I need to warn them and tell them to stay away from me here. I need to warn them of the monster I set free. I don't know what it wants or why it was down here, but I fear for the life I left behind above ground. Maybe someone can stop it. Maybe I can stop it. In my shattered mind, I remember where I used to work, where I used to live. If I can find them at the right time, maybe I can warn them. Maybe I can save them from a demise such as this. That was Beneath the Powerline by Jesse Pullins, performed by yours truly, Otis Jiry. If you weren't nervous about electrical interference before, you might be now.
I think I'll be taking the long way around the next time I see a clearing under those wires. If you enjoyed tonight's journey through floating dogs, cord-strangled homes, power line clearings, eclipses, and deer stands that should have been left alone, you're in luck. There's more waiting for you in the patrons area. Extended, ad-free episodes featuring bonus tales and exclusive horrors you won't hear anywhere else.
It's just $7.99 a month, or save big with a yearly plan, and it gives you full access to every story, every scream, without a single commercial break. You'll be supporting indie horror and making sure the doors to the dark stay open.
To join, just head to simplyscarypodcast.com and click the Patrons tab, or go straight to chillingtalesfordarknights.com to become a member. Come closer to the stories, if you dare.
From all of us here at Chilling Entertainment, thank you for your support.
If tonight's episode proved anything, it's that some places aren't just creepy, they're hungry. A floating shape that shouldn't exist. A house wrapped and strangled in miles of cords. A clearing beneath power lines that hums with more than electricity. A sky that bleeds during an eclipse. A deer stand that watches more than the tree line.
Tonight was a reminder that some thresholds are meant to remain untouched and some trails never walked. But horror doesn't wait for permission. It finds you in the quiet stretches, on back roads, and in the woods you thought you knew.
If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our parent channel, Chilling Tales for Dark Nights, on YouTube, and ring that notification bell so you never miss a new nightmare.
We also want to hear from you. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and tell us which story stuck with you tonight, or which one you were too afraid to finish alone.
And let's not forget to thank Jesse Pullins and Velox Books for leading us into tonight's Forbidden Places. Silent Screaming is out now on Amazon in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle. 17 stories in total, with tonight's 5 being just the beginning.
Pullins blends excitement and terror in equal measure, says fellow author and horror fiction aficionado Travis Brown. We couldn't agree more. So the next time someone dares you to explore the strange, the sealed, or the silent,
remember, some places weren't just abandoned. They were left behind for a reason.
Sleep well, listeners.
If you can.
Thanks for listening. You've been listening to Scary Stories Told in the Dark, a production of Chilling Entertainment and the creative team at Chilling Tales for Dark Nights, and a proud member of the Simply Scary Podcasts network. Visit simplyscarypodcast.com today to learn more about our network and our other amazing storytelling programs. Tonight's program was hosted, and its featured stories performed by yours truly, Otis Jiry. Selected stories have been adapted with the kind permission of their respective authors. Original music provided by Luke Hodgkinson and Jesse Cornett. Sound design and final mixing and mastering provided by executive producer and director Craig Groshek. Program's artwork and logo by David Romero. If you're looking for some fresh tales on a daily basis while waiting for the next podcast, check out my YouTube channel, the Otis Jiry channel, and my extensive collection of narrated tales there. Simply search on YouTube by my name, and you'll find me. And don't forget to subscribe and press the bell notification icon to get my latest releases. Got a scary tale of your own that you'd like performed? I take submissions. Email it to me today at otis@simplyscarypodcast.com to have your terrifying tome considered for production in a future episode of this show. That's OTIS@simplyscarypodcast.com. If you've enjoyed what you heard on tonight's program and are joining us on your favorite podcast app, subscribe to us to be sure you never miss an episode, and leave a 5-star review and a comment. Your feedback means a lot to me. You can also follow Chilling Tales for Dark Nights and yours truly on Facebook to connect anytime and get the latest updates on this and other programs and my channel. If you're listening on the Chilling Tales for Dark Nights YouTube channel, do us a favor and hit the subscribe button and the bell notification icon for ctfdn as well to get more spooky tales from me and the crew and another episode of this program each and every Wednesday. And don't forget to hit that thumbs up button to tell us how we're doing and leave a kind word or a request. And don't forget to visit us at chillingtalesfordarknights.com and consider supporting the team by becoming a patron. In addition to helping us out, you'll get exclusive access to our audio archive and ad-free downloads of all your favorite stories, including those you've heard on this program. As for me, I'll be back next Wednesday with more terrifying tales to keep you up all night. But that's all right. Who needs sleep anyway?
Chilling Tales for Dark Nights.